Hello, my name's Darren Southcott. I'm a visiting professor at Jeju National University. I'm in this lecture going to be talking about intercultural education or understanding through place-based education. So the content of this lecture will be looking at intercultural education. This is slightly different from multicultural education due to its focus on interconnections. And then we have a look at the concept of place. Now, this is a geographic concept, but it's also a concept we can implement in the classroom. We're going to look at this through place-based education, which is an approach to education which has place at its foundation. We're going to look at the benefits of place-based education, and then we're going to look at how place-based education can contribute to intercultural education. Okay, so before we go any further, let's look a bit closer at the concept of intercultural education. So here we have a quote from the UNESCO guidelines for intercultural education, and they say that intercultural education is to go beyond passive coexistence. And this is a key point. It's not about merely imbibing knowledge. It's about learning to coexist together and being an active participant in coexistence. It also aims to achieve a developing and sustainable way of living together in multicultural societies. So it is part of a multicultural community, but it's a different approach to multiculturalism. It does this through the creation of understanding of, respect for, and dialogue between the different cultural groups. And please pay attention to that issue of dialogue between groups, respect for those groups, and understanding of those groups. This is a slightly different perspective from some approaches to multicultural education, which in some forms are more about learning from other groups or learning about other groups. The difference in intercultural education is that we're learning to be in dialogue with the other groups. This is a slight change in emphasis, and it might not be shared across all types of multicultural education, but it is a difference that I want to bring attention to, and it's the reason that I've selected intercultural education as my key term rather than multicultural education. Here we have some principles that have been laid out by UNESCO. They produced the guidelines on intercultural education in 2006, and they have three main principles. I think these are a good starting point to understand the foundation for this approach to education. As you can see, principle 1, it respects the cultural identity of the learner through the provision of culturally appropriate and responsive quality education for all. So this principle starts with the individual learner. And from there, we move to principle 2. Principle 2, intercultural education provides every learner with the cultural knowledge, attitudes and skills necessary to achieve active and full participation in society. So you can see principle 1 focusing on the learner, principle 2 about participation in society. This is why I think this is a key difference in the approach. It's about how to enable the participation in society while also recognizing the inherent value of those individuals. Now, principle 3 takes this a bit further. Principle 3, intercultural education provides all learners with cultural knowledge, attitudes, and skills that enable them to contribute to respect, understanding, and solidarity among individuals, ethnic, social, cultural, and religious groups and nations. So this is more about placing these individuals and making sure that they are active participants in society, and then focusing on how groups within society are fully exchanging and respecting each other and ensuring that there is mutual connection and interchange. So I like this approach to education for this difference in perspective. And I think that this is why this is a valuable approach to look at implementing through different forms of education. And in this lecture, I'm talking about place-based education because I believe this provides a useful framework to implement intercultural education. So before looking at what place-based education is, we need to know about place. What is place? This is a very common word. We all understand the meaning of place. It has a very straightforward meaning. Here we can see it's often referred to as a situated, objective, spatial area, such as a home, a position or a point. This is a common objective, spatial and material meaning for place. Here I've used the image of a map on a smartphone. Now this is quite useful to show how most of us think of place. It's a location, it's dislocated, it's objective, it's not an emotional connection, it's a spatial objective representation somewhere on a map, somewhere that is outside of an individual. It's a very objective meaning to place. Now this is just a very common understanding of place, but it's very different from how we talk about place in human geography. And this is why I want to look at place-based education, because place in the geographic sense is somewhere that is much less spatial and more experiential and phenomenological. It's something we experience through our senses, our feelings, our histories, our embeddedness in a local area, our experience of the landscape, of the connections around us, of the people around us. It's much more of an experiential understanding, a subjective understanding. It's a feeling of connectedness. It can be physical, but it can also be emotional or spiritual. It's sometimes to a particular geographic area, but it also, through this connection to place, we are more likely to feel included and participative in that area. And this is why I am going to argue that this feeling of connectedness to place is a key foundation to any approach to multicultural education or intercultural education. Through this connection to place, we feel connected to complex systems that are becoming more global and more harder to understand. So through this connection, I want to argue we can foster a more inclusive intercultural and multicultural society. If you look at how geographers have looked at the idea of place, we have Yi-Fu Tuan, who calls it a center of felt value. Also, Edward Relf calls it one of the significant centers of our immediate experiences of the world. So I hope you can see how this concept can be really valuable when we're looking at issues within multicultural societies. What are the kind of problems faced in multicultural societies? Well, we have issues of alienation, we have issues of exclusion, we have issues of misunderstandings, miscommunications. By embedding people more in the local environment, in the local landscape, we're making stronger connections with history, with people around them. We can help foster more inclusion and strengthen our societies to deal with multicultural change. So what is place-based education? Place-based education, according to Gregory Smith, focuses on the incorporation of local knowledge, skills, and issues into the curriculum. It involves an effort to restore learning experiences that were once the basis of children's acculturation and socialization. Now, in a globalized world, in an increasingly modernized high technology world, we are more and more dislocated from the environment around us. We spend more of our times in schools, in study rooms, in offices, and we spend less and less time with the people in our local environment. We spend less time in the local landscape. We spend less time getting to know local heritage, spending time in nature. So we're being disconnected from the landscape around us and the meanings in the landscape around us. And I want to argue that enabling people to reconnect to the local landscape is one of the most important ways of fostering inclusion, because there is nothing more democratic than the natural environment that we all depend on equally. So I'd like to argue that through place-based education that is sited in the landscape, people from all cultures are able to fully participate, and that can help us build strong, resilient societies that have strong communities that are fully inclusive. So let's look at some of the characteristics of place-based education. Here you can see the top one there, which is a key issue we are facing in our globalized societies, and that is being an antidote to apathy and alienation. Increasingly, in a globalized world, we are talking more about alienation, apathy, disconnection, exclusion. Place-based education, it combats all of these things. And so I think that we can't overlook it as a valuable tool in building a multicultural society. I'm not saying this is the only approach to intercultural education, but I am saying it's a really valuable tool that we would be silly to overlook when we are looking at building intercultural education and multicultural education within our schools, within our communities. Here we have immersion in local heritage, cultures, landscapes and experiences. If we can connect people to the areas around them, the landscapes, the histories, the heritages, then we increase the connection with that land and with the people in it. And that enables individuals of all cultures to feel that connection and build resilience within the community. We need to build understanding and connection. I think that disconnection is a key word that we hear a lot about following the changes of globalization. It happens in Jeju Island as well as everywhere around the world. As people feel disconnected from a globalizing culture, a globalizing system they feel distant from. And the best way to combat this is to feel deeply connected to your own landscape and understand how those global systems are changing your local landscape, connecting the local to the global. Affiliation with communities and regions. Wherever you come from, you're going to want to feel connected to the people who live in your area. This is not to do with multicultural or intercultural. This is a universal that we need to feel connection with people around us. This also affects generational change, as younger generations are disconnected from older generations. So I want to show how place-based education enables us to re-strengthen those connections. And this can help for a variety of values that we hold dear in our society. It can be the foundation for the whole curriculum. We don't learn about nature in the landscape. We learn about science, maths, art, geography, literature, history. All of that is within the landscape. It just depends how we approach it. We use different approaches to learn about different subjects. Through studying the natural world, we can also study maths or science, literature, and various subjects. It's interdisciplinary, and that's why it can be built into the whole curriculum. Again, the focus is on action. How are we going to make change makers and leaders? Through enabling a strong sense of connection to local landscapes and histories and heritage. I believe you enable people to go out into the world and make changes anywhere across the globe. It's about connecting them first to where they actually build their community, and from that, that's a platform for global change. These people are going to go around the world and be the global leaders of tomorrow. But we can ensure that they are rooted in their local communities before they do that. Personalized, authentic, meaningful, and engaging learning. Every individual approaches the landscape in a different way. It's not in a textbook. It's not an objective or distanced piece of knowledge that they cannot subjectively connect to. It's a landscape that has its own meanings to them and to every other person. Develops collaborative problem-solving skills. So we go as a team, we work together to solve problems in the local community, environmental problems, pollution problems. It can be related to community problems. It can be approached in various different ways. Finally, it cultivates responsibility for the environment. As we know, the environment is the foundation for any problem we seek to solve in the community. This goes for multicultural issues as it does for economic issues. We always have the environment as our ultimate foundation. And so developing respect for that has to be at the foundation of any approach to education. So, place-based education is powerful. It connects us to the landscape in ways that other approaches to education don't. Walk into a classroom, it's a sterile environment. Walk into the landscape, you come alive. You feel the strength of nature, of the historical heritage you see all around you. It really connects you back to the area where you live in your community. It's personal. You bring your own meaning to the landscape. It's not a textbook that has been mass produced. It's a landscape that you all experience in different ways. It's engaging. You move into the landscape and you feel it, you touch it, you smell it. It's not, again, a sterile environment that has no connection to you as an individual. It's inclusive. Hopefully, no one is excluded from the landscape. We can all access it. We can all look at it and reflect on it in our own ways. It's expansive. It connects us to a global system of change. Looking at just a woodland in our local environment can help us understand global processes of change by understanding what is happening to that environment. It's cross-disciplinary. As I mentioned, we can look at various subjects through the landscape. We can look at maths, nature, literature. It really has endless opportunities for various academic subjects. So I think that place-based education is the ideal foundation, and I'm going to look at some examples of how we can implement intercultural education through place-based education in the remainder of the lecture. So let's look at some of the inherent links between place-based education and intercultural education. Place-based education promotes inclusion and understanding of difference. Intercultural education promotes empathy and engaging with that difference. So we can use place-based education to practice intercultural education. They share the same foundation, this understanding of difference, placing local areas within a global context, placing individuals within global systems. So I think they're really valuable and they complement each other. Eldering and Rothenberg state that intercultural education focuses on reality of difference in society through the impacts of globalization. And I think there's nothing more important to place-based education than the impact of globalization on our local landscapes, on our communities, and on the environment around us. We can't fail to notice the effects of globalization on our communities without connecting the local to the global when we practice place-based education. So I think you can see that these links are really valuable, and they mean that we can practice both of these education approaches at the same time. Place-based education also explores how globalization has impacted the self and the landscape. How have we been affected by globalization? How has the landscape been affected by globalization? How does this put us within a global system that is connecting us with other locations around the world, with other people around the world, other places that have their own histories? What are the hidden connections within the landscape? So this is another key point. How can we use the landscape to uncover hidden global connections? Globalization is making these connections more and more clear, but all of our landscapes hide those global connections. I'll be looking at some examples in a minute. The focus for globalization is place. We don't engage with globalization anywhere else except place. Place is the only point at which globalization occurs. What I mean by this is globalization happens everywhere. Every place you go to around the world is being impacted by globalization. You can't escape globalization. It's a reality of life and it's affecting every single place in different ways. And it's important that we understand those effects in each of our localities, and that helps us to understand the changes, and also it helps us understand how we can start to change our reality. And for an intercultural perspective, this helps us understand why our societies are changing and how we can help them change and be more resilient. And finally, both place-based education and intercultural education foster experiences, influences, meanings, and connections with other people, places, and cultures. So you can see how this is about interconnection, and intercultural education is inherently about those interconnections. One of the key points that often is raised when we talk about globalization is disconnection. And intercultural education is about fighting disconnection, fighting alienation, fighting exclusion in our classrooms, in our communities, in our countries. It's about how we can build an inclusive society through intercultural exchange. Place and the concept of place-based education is inherently about combating disconnection. It doesn't matter where you are from, what your background is, where your ancestors came from, for you to be able to connect to the environment. There's nothing stopping you from being able to go out into nature and learning about the local landscape. What are the histories of that landscape, the heritage? What are the stories that are within that landscape? And I think that this is why it's such an important tool for intercultural education, because it connects people to the local landscape and it builds a point of reference for everyone within that landscape. David Orr, a renowned ecologist, asserts that we need to ensure that the global is rooted in the importance of place. As we change, as we globalize, place becomes more important because more and more of us feel disconnected. And that's increasing various forms of apathy, alienation, and to combat that, we need to reconnect with our landscapes. David Orr says, a great deal of what passes for knowledge is little more than abstraction piled on top of abstraction, disconnected from tangible experience, real problems, and the places where we live and work. In this sense, it is utopian, which literally means nowhere. So what I want to say is we need to make sure that education is about somewhere and also about someone. So place and intercultural understanding. There are 5 themes suggested by Gregory Smith for intercultural place-based education. This includes cultural studies, nature studies, real-world problem solving, internship and entrepreneurial opportunities, and introduction to community processes. These are at the heart of participation in the community, different ways of ensuring connection with people around us. Clifford Knapp states that place-based education is multidisciplinary and experiential. It reflects educational philosophy that connects place with self and community, and it is multi-generational and multicultural. So I hope this has shown how valuable both of these approaches can be to each other. They can complement each other and they can be used together to enable the achievement of the principles within each approach. What I'd like to do now is look at some examples from the local landscape to show how we can implement this in our local areas. Where I teach is Jeju National University of Education. Behind our university, we are very lucky to have a Orem, which is a volcanic cone, monogenetic volcanic cone in Jeju Island. This is called Sarabong. Now, I use this example to show all of our landscapes are full of teaching opportunities. So this is the view from Sarabong. We have here the ocean, we have a walking route here. This is a very perhaps everyday landscape. People walk here, people exercise here, but you dig a little bit beneath the surface and you can connect Sarabong to various locations and processes all across the world. And what I want to show is how we can use place-based education to increase understanding of global processes and the different effects of global histories upon our landscapes. The most obvious example is if you go to Sarabong, you will see tourists. It's on an Ole Trail 18, and this has brought millions of people to Jeju Island. Through tourism, we can understand Jeju's place in the global society. We can understand its connection to other places around the world, places in the mainland, places around the region of East Asia, places around the whole globe. So tourism is a process that is changing the landscape in Jeju Island. And by understanding this process and understanding our landscape, we connect ourselves to these global processes and we can start to understand the changes our society is undergoing. Heritage. Now, I have taught for years at the university, and very few students know that there is a World Heritage designation at Sarabong. At Sarabong, we have Chilmorigdan Yongdungut, which is a shamanic ritual, which is designated by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Many people walk past the landscape and have no idea that once a year, this ritual is held at the shrine, and this ritual is UNESCO World Heritage. So just by walking in the local landscape, we can learn of an example of heritage that is not only a very rare example of shamanic heritage in a developed country such as Korea, but we can also learn about connections to different places around the world. Where else do we see cultural heritage designated by UNESCO? What can we learn about those places? What does this designation mean for Jeju Island as Jeju globalizes? This used to be a persecuted tradition on Jeju Island. Now it is celebrated. What does that change mean for our communities and our landscapes? Geology. Jeju Island is a volcanic island. What can we learn about volcanology from Jeju? How can we connect Jeju to other places around the world that have similar geologies? We can connect it to Iceland in Europe and the volcanology there. We can connect it to Hawaii in the Pacific and their volcanology. We can understand more about Jeju's heritage and what it shares with other islands around the world and other cultures and other people by understanding its geology and how that geology impacted the landscape and the culture on the island. Water. Jeju Island has water flowing underground. It has aquifers that are some of the largest in the whole region. On Sarabong, there are water processing plants that we can use as an education tool to understand Jeju's water supply issues. We can understand Jeju's connection with the global water supply issue as well. We can use this as an example of how processes at the global scale impact Jeju at the local scale. We also have colonization. On Sarabong, there are caves. Those caves were established during Japanese colonial rule in the 20th century. Many cultures around the world have experienced colonization. We can use this as a teaching opportunity to understand other places experiencing war, other places experiencing colonization, and understanding the effects of colonization on society today. These are hidden in the landscape, but by understanding where they are, by learning about them, we can see even the hills behind our workplaces, behind our homes, were actually constructed in the process of colonization. These were built as storage facilities for potential invasion by the United States to defend the colonial Korea which was ruled by Japan at the time. And so we can understand the place of Jeju within a global system. Defense. We have Yeondae and Bongsu, which are smoke signal installations across the island. On Sarabong, there is a Yeondae as well, and this can be used as an example of defensive structures built in previous periods to understand how people used to defend themselves against threats. This can help us understand today how other people in other areas also defend against threats. Education. We have Jeju Museum. This is all within a local landscape, and we have a museum, national museum, various opportunities to go in there and to understand local heritage, local people, local place. And one of my favorite examples is Kim Man-dok. She was a philanthropist of the Joseon era. She has a memorial garden. Her grave was relocated to an area near Sarabong after development happened in Gonipdong, where her grave originally was. And she is an example of a strong woman leader who was a philanthropist. At a time of extreme hunger and hardship, she donated her resources to help Jeju people survive and overcome hunger at a time of extreme hardship. And we can use this as an example of gender equality, as an example of women's empowerment. And we can use this as an example, as an opportunity to learn about other women who have done similar things in other countries, in other locations. And I think this is a great example of strong womanhood on Jeju Island as well. We also have conservation. Now, you might wonder why I've shown an image of a rabbit. This is also on Sarabong. If you walk up Sarabong, you have a beautiful park. People exercise, people sit down, they talk to family members, relax. And we also have lots of rabbits. And this is a really good opportunity to learn about invasive species. Now, these were released, former pets who people have got bored of and put out to pasture on the grasslands. And now they have populated the hill. And they're quite a pleasant sight for people to go and look at. Children like to feed them. But they also teach us about changing ecology. How is a global society, a modernizing world, changing our local environment? This is an invasive species, and they are repopulating the hillsides. And this is a great opportunity to learn about how our ecology is changing as our society is changing as well. And finally, I'd like to end on perhaps the most poignant note of Jeju history. And this is also a history that is embedded in the landscape near Sarabong. This is on the edge of Byeoldobong, which is the hill next door. This is Gonuldong, which is a disappeared village that was lost during the Jeju Sa-sam massacre, the April 3rd massacre between 1947 and 1954. This was an ideological conflict when there were great punitive forces sent from the mainland with some support from the United States early on in the conflict, and many islanders lost their lives during this conflict. And in this village, we see the remains of houses, one of the best preserved sites from this period, and it's right on the landscape. And you can go and you can see how people's fields were laid out at this time. Now, the reason this is important is because at a time of global conflict, we need to understand how communities are dealing with issues like this. Jeju Island also experienced such hardship, such trauma. And by understanding our landscape, we can start to connect our histories with other locations around the world. From a multicultural perspective, we need to understand the realities of conflict. Why are more and more countries becoming multicultural? It's not just about economics, it's also about conflict around the world. What happens when communities are impacted by conflict? We know that people flee those areas of conflict. They look for somewhere safe to live. In Jeju, we have Yemeni refugees. They have conflict in their own country, and they came here for safety. And that's why this is really poignant, because in the past, Jeju people also experienced conflict, and they also sought safety outside of the island. Many of them came back to start and redevelop the island after the conflict actually was After the conflict died down, people came back to Jeju and helped to redevelop society. And I think that this is the perfect issue to think about how society is changing, how the world is changing, and how we can use our landscape to look at hidden processes of global change that we don't pay attention to. So I'd like to end on this and say that I think that looking at the landscape as an opportunity for place-based education, and through place-based education, we can realize the principles of intercultural understanding. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope you look at ways of implementing place-based education within your own contexts.